Alright, so let me tell you a little story about how I ended up finding a cheap flight in a pretty complicated situation. I'm traveling around the world right now, and I'm currently in Israel. And yeah, it's not an easy time to be here, the country's in the middle of a war, but we're all hoping for better days. Now, I want to be in New York for the holidays, and then I will have to fly back again to Israel. So, I started looking up flights but quickly realized it's not going to be easy. Turns out there are no direct flights from Israel to the States right now. And even the connecting flights that I could be looking at are either super expensive or they keep getting canceled at the last minute. It's just a big mess with few flights available, and those that do fly are charging crazy amounts, like $2,000. That's what most people are paying to fly now, from Israel to the US, and it's not something I'm willing to spend. So I decided to challenge myself to find something for under $700. First, I knew I had to book with an airline that wouldn't cancel on me. After checking my options, I realized only Israeli airlines were flying consistently without changing. So I start checking out destinations of Israeli airlines where they fly to for a cheap price, so I can start my travel journey from there. I ended up booking a flight from Israel to Athens, Greece, with an Israeli airline called Israel. This flight was pretty cheap comparing to others. It cost me only $87 for one way. Now, I could have gone ahead and booked my next flight from Athens to New York right away, but I thought, hold on a second, I don't want to cut it too close. What if there's a delay with my first flight? Plus, since I'll be in Greece anyway, why not take a little time to enjoy it? So I booked my flight from Athens to New York for a week later. This way, I get to explore Greece for a bit, and I'm not risking missing my New York flight if there's a hiccup. A week later, I'll be on my second flight with Norse Atlantic Airways, a low-cost airline that flies between Europe and the US, and I scored a great deal for just $248. So now I have a solid plan to get to New York, and I also get a little time in Greece along the way. Now, for the return after the holidays, I wanted to be on the safe side, so I realized I'll have to do a connection in Europe again. So I start checking to which destinations are there cheap flights from New York, and I find this great deal for a cheap return flight from New York back to Paris with Norse Atlantic, and this cost only $143. I was actually surprised from that cheap price. And then, from Paris to Israel, I'll use an Israeli airline again for reliability. This one was only $61. Like before, I planned to spend a week in Paris too, to give myself a buffer and to take advantage of the chance to explore. When I added up all the flights, the total came out to just $539, way under my original $700 budget. I'd set myself this challenge, and I actually managed to pull it off. So here's what I learned from all of this. First, when flights are expensive, you don't have to settle for the usual connections. Create your own route by mixing and matching different flights. For example, that very cheap $143 flight that I find from New York to Paris really helped me stick to my budget. By adding this great stop, I got my whole trip way cheaper. Second, if you're making connections, avoid tight layovers. Giving yourself extra time like I did means you don't risk missing a connection if there's a delay. You don't have to do a full week, but just make sure it's enough to be safe. Third, if you have time in cities on the way, like I have in Athens or Paris, take advantage of it. Instead of just a few hours layover, make it a few days, so you can actually explore. I found it way more exciting to have a week in each place than just one quick flight from Israel to New York. Fourth, know which airlines to trust based on where you're traveling. For certain countries, it's really important to choose airlines that are reliable for that route. Since I'm flying to and from Israel, I knew Israeli airlines were my safest bet. If I'd gone with others, there's a high chance the flights would get canceled and ruin my whole plan. And finally, if you want this kind of travel flexibility, pack light. I only have a backpack, which makes it easy for me to add stops or spend extra time in a place. If I had a big suitcase, moving around like this would be a lot more of a hassle. Traveling light really frees you up to take advantage of more stops and more opportunities. And that's it. With a little bit of planning, some flexibility, and knowing which flights to book, I turned a complicated situation into a travel adventure. I think it's pretty awesome.